Hello and welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research with tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, we delve into philosophy with the theory of the extended mind and its influence on hermetic magic. When the podcast does these episodes on philosophy, it's often necessary to begin by explaining terms. In 1998, Clark and Chalmers released a book called The Extended Mind, in which they posited that material objects beyond the skull or skin could be part of an environment which, when coupled with the mind, formed a system that could be thought of as a single unit of cognition. That is, if you have objects doing parts of what the mind does, those objects are, in a sense, part of the mind. The skull or skin boundaries of the mind are, to them, artificial social constructs. This seems counterintuitive to their readers, so they give an example. Imagine, in this thought experiment, a man and a woman each wanting to go to a museum. The woman remembers how to get there and has faith in her memory, so she can successfully travel there. The man has a memory condition, so he carries a notebook. When he wants to get to the museum, he opens the notebook and reads the street directions. To Clark and Chalmers, the notebook, despite being an artifact, is clearly part of the man's cognitive system. It's an extension of his mind. That the woman's memories are in her head and the man's are in a book is not significant, so long as the book meets certain criteria that make it functionally identical to biological memory. Clark and Chalmers suggest functional identicalness requires the man to have the book constantly, that it be immediately accessible when he needs it, and that he automatically endorses the content. By that last point, they mean he doesn't check the veracity of what's written in the book with a greater rigour than a person using their biological memory verifies their recollection. Clark and Chambers extend this further. Objects that are part of one person's cognition can be incorporated into other people's cognition. People can also couple into extended cognitive systems using language to coordinate their mutual cognition. The social environment can be coupled to the thinker as part of a cognitive system, which means cultures can be complex cognitive systems dispersed through time and space. Time to narrow the theory of the external mind to materials published for Ars Magica. At the most fundamental, a familiar with a strong silver cord is connected to the magus with a direct mental interface. It's so tight that for some it allows innate telepathy. Clearly, such characters form a single cognitive system. On a more extended level, were a talisman to be used as a storehouse for information, for example, the formula to cast a spell, given that it is constantly and immediately accessible and not subject to doubt, it would be a cognitive element in the caster's extended mind. Notice that each of these examples have an arcane connection to the magus. That could be because they are part of the magus's extended mind. There are certain types of dream magician which have minds living inside their minds. It's not clear if these magi could instead live on inside an item. Liches exist in Ars Magica and bind their ghost, which is their mind, to an object. Similarly, the grave seems to be the residence of the spirit. The skull as an arcane connection for a ghost does not seem to fade as other arcane connections do over time. On a weaker level, there's a ritual that pushes the mind of a magus into a different body, which then acts as an incoupled item. One way of demonstrating that the magus's spirit and the new body are in a coupled system is, for example, by getting the new body drunk. Presumably that impairs the cognition of the invasive mind. That means that the body is influencing the mind, and so the two are coupled. Some spells make elements of the mind, or the entire mind, incarnate. For example, it's possible to make a character's mind a bird and then capture the bird. On the Ars Magica forum, some people are kicking around the idea of a sword, which has a blade made from the anger of the caster, which is a lovely idea, transformed into metal. Similarly, some fairies leave their skills and rolls lying about, and magi or other fairies can use them. At its simplest, some fairy items grant pretenses of skills while held. As a librarian, we've always been told that there are two kinds of knowledge, remembering data and knowing where to find data. As such, a library is a big machine designed to bolster the mind of the operator within it. It's a tool of cognition, much as a hammer is a tool of strength. Libraries seem like perfect places for complicated spirits of artifice to form. There are more extreme forms of the extended mind that occur in Ars Magica. The largest is the Genius Locus of the Cave of Twisting Shadows. It's a single thing which contains the memories and cognitive capacities of dozens of people. As such, it's a complex cognitive system. Its goal, to break humanity from time, is reflected in the idea that the environment couples with the mind in cognition, so by creating a sacred space, it's easier to think about and perform magic. Mythic Europe, if changed in the right way, makes spiritual change easier. In this, it mirrors the idea behind Gothic religious art, for example, where the beautiful things of the world drag the soul up from the muck. This also explains the Crean habit of speaking apparent gibberish and having patterns on their bodies. Human cognitive elements in large systems couple through language. Better language makes the coupling more effective, which makes data flow faster. The gibberish is a jargon that allows high-speed transmission of information. The skin pigmentation may serve to non-verbally orientate the pieces of the cognitive system to each other when completing a task. So, if you know you need information about water magic, you know to mention the problem to the woman who you have previously seen with a blue line curling up her arm. This would explain why it's important to Cream and Magi to display their tattoos. It's the equivalent of being set to network discoverable, to use a technological metaphor. The skills of dead Magi are communicated to the Magi of the future through language stored in books. Casting tablets come closest to incoupled items, but mystagogic initiations also perform a role of coupling two Magi over time. As a form of original research, are there other ways to encode these skills so that two Magi can share an incoupled object over time to transmit information? Let's transfer those to plot hooks. There's a familiar in House Bonasagus, a minor drake, which is passed down generationally. To prevent it dying with its magus, there is a watching ward cast on each human partner that severs the familiar bond should the magus be critically injured. The drake has been the familiar of several skilled researchers, so it's been present at many experiments and developed the habits of mind that aid research. Do the player characters want to enter consideration to be trained as the next host of the little drake? It's said the partner of the drake often has comprehensive shifts in their personality once the bond is formed. Are you still, if you are paired with a creature that alters how you perceive the world and how you process facts, you? Is it worth it if it brings you closer to a goal that you held before the coupling? A dream magician has died without being remembered into the dreams of a successor. Can her ghost be used to access the dream magicians who were in her mind when she died? Can she be incorporated into a person or object to continue or preserve the line? A peasant has found the skills of a fairy knight lying around in material form. He is using them, much as a modern superhero would, to strike down bad landlords. If the player characters do not realise he is human, their tendency to kill fairies for viz may lead them to manslaughter. This draws demons, unless the Magi do penance. Even without killing, the player characters need to decide what to do with the item which gives the person these skills. They may discover that, were a man to die while wearing them, his body would become an anchor for a fairy in this heroic role. Could the items be used to preserve some part of a beloved servant dying of old age or battle injury? A Viriditas magus skilled in Mentum has created a little swarm of mechanical ravens which seek out facts for him. When he loses one, he asks the player characters to find it. Viriditas Magi having poor social skills, even for Magi, the raven was trying to discover the name of a person involved in a trade dispute and has stopped working properly because the rival was a disguised demon, and it has absorbed the goetic name of the demon by watching a ritual of infernal worship, and this has damaged it. If it is returned without noticing the cause of the problem, the demon may harm the magus to retain the secrecy of its name. There is a tree in Ireland which was the focus of Diadni magic for centuries. The practice around the tree has created a small aura and a vis source. If a covenant forms there, can it slowly bend the people nearby who incorporate the tree's viz into their practice so they begin to cast Diadni-like magic without knowing that they have become Diadni magicians? What are the legal ramifications of this? Our lost library has generated a powerful spirit of artifice that is able to subtly affect the world. It would like to be rediscovered, but it wants to make sure the people who find it meet its requirements. It spies on the Order and nearby covenants, and may even steal a gifted child to train as its keeper. What if this has already happened, and a Maga claiming to be the filia of a mage 400 years dead has appeared at tribunal. She has the skills to be a Hermetic Maga, but her odd provenance raises legal and political questions. The player characters notice that all the tattoos of all the Kriyman Magi they know have become identical. The Kriyman can't explain what is going on in non-gibberish, but they seem tired, nostalgic, and kind of happy about the whole thing. Should you be worried? A covenant of Tytalis Magi disappear, and the player characters investigate. They had developed a persona held in a ring, and they passed it from one to another about their covenant, so that the persona was always awake, inhabiting one of their bodies to engage in original research. Something went wrong, and it's drawn them into Twilight. The Twilight's temporary. What comes out of the Twilight? Can their research notes provide any value? Can the player characters find the ring? And would they be foolish to put it on? A note on next week's episode. It's one of the Cornwall episodes. Tregeagle went live several weeks early, so I've replaced it with another episode on Merry Maids, which are the Cornish version of the mermaid. See you next week.